Hey friends, it's your pal Mike Shea from Sly Flourish, here with another episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy GM Prep. In this weekly show, I go through steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master while preparing for my Sunday role-playing game. In this case, I am playing Shadowdark RPG by Kelsey, Dionne, Arcane Library. Excellent, really fun, old school style, modern sensibility role-playing game. We are running in a campaign setting called the Gloaming, which comes from Cursed Scroll 1, also by Arcane Library, built for Shadowdark. It's been lots of fun. This show, like all of the work of Sly Flourish, is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to all kinds of incredible features, a monthly Q&A, a dedicated Discord server, a bunch of tips and tricks for running your games, tools to help you run your games, the City of Arches source book, Uncovered Secrets Volume 1 and 2, and a whole lot more. You get tons and tons of stuff for becoming a patron of Sly Flourish. So please consider it. And to the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you so much for your support. We did not have a game last week because a bunch of the people were at running games at another local convention, so they weren't here. So there were three things I wanted to talk about real quickly about Shadowdark, because they've come up in the last couple of weeks, and thoughts that I've had and other things that have happened, and I wanted to talk about them. One was the discussion of Shadowdark and longer campaigns. This came up. So my friends Sean Merwin and Teos Abadia on the Mastering Dungeons podcast talked about Shadowdark. So if you want to hear another point of view of Shadowdark, you can listen to the two of them. They have some really good thoughts and insights about it. And there was this question about Shadowdark and long campaigns. Can Shadowdark run longer campaigns? It was a question I had originally when I started playing Shadowdark. And obviously the answer for me is yes. It can absolutely run long campaigns. It's a different kind of campaign, though. And I think what gets lost in the conversation about whether or not Shadowdark is a good game for longer campaigns or a good game for shorter campaigns, it's what we're really trying to discuss is it a character-focused game or not? And Kelsey, in the discussion she has with Baron de Ropp so Kelsey and Baron de Ropp had a wonderful video, 2-hour-long video, where they talked. It was like a fireside chat with the two of them talking about diving in deep. Look, they even have a fireplace. Diving in deep into the design of Shadowdark, how it works, how it fits. It's fascinating. I got 50 minutes left of this glorious video, but I really enjoyed it. And she brings up a very good consideration about Shadowdark, and I think about some OSR ideas, which is when you are playing Shadowdark, you aren't the character, you're observing the character. That as a player, right? When you're a player in some RPGs, you really are diving in and becoming that character and playing from their point of view. And in other games, you are watching the character as they engage in their story. Where I think this is interesting, and my understanding is that Kelsey actually had not played the game Darkest Dungeon, a video game called Darkest Dungeon, but that game was there are certain video games I played that changed a lot about how I think about tabletop role-playing games, and Darkest Dungeon was one of them. And one of the things about Darkest Dungeon is that there's a point in that game where I realize that I am not the characters. That I have these 4 party members that are going into these dark dungeons and they're fighting terrible monsters and they're slowly going crazy and terrible things are happening to them. And eventually they just break and you just send them off to pasture or they die, right? In some cases they have a heart attack and fall over dead. In other cases they're killed by monsters. And in some cases they go bananas and you just send them off into the wilds. And I realized at a certain point in that game that you're not the characters. You're not the heroes. Your point of view is not from the point of view of the heroes. You're a hero manager in that game, that you're managing heroes, that your job is to complete Darkest Dungeon and you will grind through heroes to do it. And I think that same kind of idea, and Kelsey brought this up in this video, is that Kelsey said that you're observing the characters. You aren't the characters. And that is a fundamental difference between what I would say are kind of more modern TTRPGs and more old school style TTRPGs that I had not really considered and thought about before, but makes sense. I've seen it, and now I've seen it manifest in my own games. That idea that like the players are the ones being driven by what they're going to do, and they are running the characters through it, which is different than building a character and getting in that character's head and doing what that character is doing. Now, as GMs, we're used to this because like I get into my NPC's head all the time and then they die, right? So I'm used to like, getting into characters and having them get killed. And my players are going through that too. But I think that switch of like you're watching what happens to the characters is different than being the characters is a really fundamental It's a really interesting thought, and I think it's kind of a fundamental difference in how Shadowdark plays and how other games play. But when you talk about like long campaigns, you could have a long campaign in Shadowdark. You just may have a series of characters in that long campaign. We now have in our campaign only one character who actually began at the beginning of the campaign. Everyone else has died at this point, and sometimes players have lost 2 or 3 characters during this point. I don't know if I'm actually killing them off faster than normal. But I mean, they're pretty squishy and like bad things happen. So, that's one difference between how the campaign runs. Yes, you can run a long campaign, but the way that you run it is not by running a single character through the campaign, which is a big difference in a modern RPG. In 5e, like once you get out of first level or second level, and first level is almost like the funnel of 5e. Once you get into like second, third, fourth level, your general expectation is you're gonna survive. That the character's not gonna die. It doesn't mean you can't die. Your odds are in your favor. In Shadowdark, I'd say the odds are not in your favor, and that is a difference. So character lethality and having a character arc in a campaign is very different from Shadowdark and say straight 5e. And I think that's a difference. So that idea of like, can you run a long campaign in Shadowdark? I have run. We're like almost 20, I think we're 20 sessions in, which is pretty long, right? 20 sessions is a lot of sessions. And I think you can run a campaign all the way from top to bottom. The question is, do you have the same characters going through it the whole time? Really different one. So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to mention that excellent video, and you can find a link in the show notes. Really, really awesome video between Baron de Ropp of Dungeon Masterpiece and Kelsey Dionne, of the creator of Shadowdark, and them diving into what it means to run Shadowdark. It is really, really an excellent video, and I highly recommend it as a way to get a better insight into like how Shadowdark was made, some of the things that she threw away. I didn't know, like Shadowdark had a skill system. She started with a skill system and then she got rid of it and stuck to the ability scores. And I think it works so much better with just ability bonuses. So that to me is really neat. All right, let's talk about my lazy prep game. Let's get my game. I got to get my session going today. I got things to do. So we are going to generate a new session planning template. I am using Notion to do my campaign planning. You can learn all about using Notion for campaign planning in the show notes. So I had 2 weeks off. No, 2 weeks, just 1 week off. So we had 1 week off, so I have to remember what happened last week. I know people died. Characters were killed. Today is 28 January 2024. We lost some characters. We lost Sirwin was killed, peacefully departed after being life drained by a mummy. Sirwin was the second to last character who started at first level and made their whole way up and died with 1 point away from level 5 or level 4. So Sirwin died relatively peacefully after having their life drained by a mummy. They then defeated the mummy, and then they decided to go down into a new crypt. Let me pull up my Albert Rodeo. So at this point, when they were going in, they were like, oh man, we do not want to go exploring these tombs. We've got a job to do. Let's do the job. And they went and did the job. And then on the way back, all those guys were dead. So they had all new characters. And the new characters were like, we should totally explore these tombs and find treasure. And so they've been opening up tombs. So on their way back, we started the last session with them fighting a mummy. And that mummy killed Sirwin. But they then killed the mummy. And I think they hurled the mummy off the edge and it died. And that was great. And then they walked into this tomb to the south, which is the tomb of Kytheros, the Lord of Time. They went into the tomb. They saw one of the chambers had been broken out. The door had been shattered open. And a pretty decent investigation would show that the mummy came out of that chamber. And they're like, okay. And then they saw that there was another sealed chamber along the way, that this chamber had a shattered door. It showed a human male priest of Kytheros on the engravings on the shattered doorway. And the other one, they saw a female priest on a sealed doorway. And they said, well, we should totally go in there. So they broke open the seal, and inside they saw a sarcophagus leaning back, and they saw treasure in the area. And they're like, oh, this is great. And they're like going for the treasure. And then the sarcophagus opens up and another mummy comes out. So they fought two mummies. By the way, mummies in Shadowdark are crazy, crazy powerful. But they just fought one. So it's not like they don't know that mummies are crazy powerful. And this mummy completely destroyed one of the characters, a character named Skull, which was very fitting because Skull was knocked unconscious and fell to the ground dying, and they were all running around, and they all watched in horror as the mummy just lifted up a foot and crushed Skull's skull. And I used my whole what's kind of the last memory that goes through your mind? They say, what's the last memory that goes through your mind right before the foot of the mummy does? And they described, and the answer was, at least I died in this bitchin' armor. Because they did get some very nice new, I think it's +3 plate armor or something, really good armor. But they got crushed. Skull got crushed and killed. And I think they just defeated the mummy. And that is where, I think and then their torch went out. And the torches always seem to go out right at the end of a session. And I think their torch went out. And I think that's where the session begins today. So let's take a look at the characters we have today. Whoops. Morrigan Nightweaver, Zealot Elf Warlock, granddaughter of Shun the Vile, daughter of Gwendolyn Nightweaver, who is a witch of Shun the Vile, who was burned to death by the Knights of St. Yidrith. Dazder, a human witch shaman, carries the remnants of Memnon. That's Jay's third character. Skull, who's dead. I don't think the player of Skull has generated a new character yet. Calum, the elf wizard. Don't know anything else about Calum. Dart, a follower of the Green Knights, studied at the for-profit wizard school, and Calum graduated. So there's two different wizards, one of whom is doesn't like they like. I think Calum made fun of Dart in school, and then Yeralt, the G is silent, who is a knight of St. Yidrith. So quite an eclectic set of characters. And again, one of the interesting things about like a Shadowdark game is you don't want to wrap too much of the story around the characters. So it's worth knowing. I would say that this could be an observation, that step 1 of the 8 steps does not work as well in the 8 steps of return for Shadowdark, because too much of a focus on the characters is going to lead to disappointment when those characters are killed, and they die often. So what is our strong start? So they're in the tomb of Kytheros. The torch is out. Only a tiny witch light shines in the dark. Slithering sounds and the sounds of stone shifting. Then comes a new character. I think the doors are going to open and a new character is going to show up, because I know we have a character who died right at the end of the last session, so I think we're going to have a new character show up. So we have an introduction of the new character. Continuing the exploration of the Shrine of Kytheros. Returning to Aklaklik and the next steps. And the next steps, I think, so we have a few. It's kind of worth like shaking our brains up to say, what do we remember? And then we can go back and look at stuff. So investigate the Tower of, what's the guy's name? I'm so bad with names. Haldren. Investigate Haldren's Tower. That's one. Confront the Knights of St. Yidrith. And it's Greaves, right? Confront Greaves Redthorn at the Redthorn camp in Twisted Marrow Tree. There they are trying to stop the coming of, not Undaluk, the other one, Almazatz. No, Undaluk, right? Undaluk the Marrow Fiend. What other paths? Those are 2 strong paths that they have. Oh, return to Wardenwood to give them the cure. And the cure is CRISPR, the sentient cure to the Mugglebub's curse. I think those are the 3 strongest paths. We have some others, and we will look at those in a bit, but we're going to jump right into secrets and clues. We need our 10 secrets. So what are some things that the characters can learn in the next game? Is there anything? So they're in the Tomb of Kytheros in particular. So like, what did the priests of Kytheros? So I think we've kind of reinforced some of this stuff, but it can never hurt. I don't know how much of this they completely picked up. Kytheros wanted to use Mugglebub to build all new worlds, but they went bad as Mugglebub twisted them into their primordial origins. Mugglebub started to use the gates created by Shun and Kytheros to invade other worlds. Kytheros sired Almazatz to destroy worlds touched by Mugglebub. Say created. It'd be kind of interesting if... So there's a question of, and I know like, hey, characters could die and all that, but if Morrigan... Oh, so I think we've determined... Yeah, I'm enjoying all of the like family relation stuff. And it's possible that... Oh yeah, so she's not... I don't know that Morrigan has a direct relationship to Almazat, but it would be kind of interesting if Almazat was sort of a stepbrother, that Almazat is a step uncle of Morrigan. And what I mean by that is Kytheros sired Almazat, this world-devouring entity, to get rid of worlds that had been corrupted by Mugdalblub. And Kytheros was going out with Shun the Vile. Shun gave birth to Gwendolen. I don't know if Gwendolen has a direct relationship with Kytheros or not, but Gwendolen is like a daughter of Shun the Vile, and Gwendolen likely, I think I've already canonized it in my head, that Gwendolen fell in love with Haldren as the two of them wanted to try to figure out how to save the world. So here's a secret. Gwendolen and Haldren knew the world knew the Gloaming was at risk long ago, and has sought a way to save it and maybe even destroy Mugdalblub forever. And I think, let's see, Morrigan is a daughter of Gwendolen and Haldren. That's kind of a secret. I don't know if I'm going to expose that anytime soon, but I think that's a good one. So this is all like Kytheros Amazot's lore. Is there anything about the Goblin Village? Who's the leader of the Goblin Village? Gorkrib wants to acquire lost artifacts to book passage to the realm of the Fae from Titania. What artifact might Gorkrib be willing to... So it'd have to be like something really good. I mean, it's probably like a single artifact or maybe a handful of artifacts. But I think, yeah, maybe the goblins feel it's time to go. What else? I think the Knights of St. Yidrith get their power from a living god who resides deep beneath. And what is their place? The Grey Wall Priory, 1406. Yeah, at the Grey Wall Priory. Any other secrets? Any other things that are going on? Any other directions I want them to go? What else? What else could they know? So that, anything that's going on. I think it will be fun to like roll a D12 to see like how bad have things gotten. It's been a while since they've been to Wardenwood, and I'm wondering like how bad things got at Wardenwood. And I think I will just roll a die and see. What other secrets? Boy, am I running out of secrets? This is always the hard part, like that final secret. Things about Kytheros, things about Almazat, things about Undaluk. The teeth of Almazat have appeared in the sky above at night. I can see it closing in. Another secret is the Marrow is a realm discovered by Kytheros that resides at the end of time and is where lies the remains of dead worlds. Is here that Almazat deposits the worlds it has devoured. What's the connection between Mugdalblub and World of Marrow? Is there a connection? Is Mugdalblub gone by that point? Is it a realm of dust and decay where organic life has been stripped bare? Yeah. Including Mugdalblub. Okay, cool. Locations I don't really need to worry about. I got those. NPCs, I think we've got everything we need there. I am going to add Gorkrib to my list there by making him current. I think Gwendolen is kind of current. And let's see what other NPCs are current. I don't know that I'm crazy about this auto-generating list of NPCs. Yeah, that all looks good. And monsters we worry about from the book. Treasure we roll, so we don't really need to worry about either of those two as well. And then I write down my session notes. Did I write down my session notes for last time? I did not. Look at me. I suck. Write your notes down, people. Be a friend to your future self and write down just a couple of bullet points about what happened. But I think we've got everything that I need today. I think, we're going to go lightweight today. It's nice because we know, I guess one thing we could do, this is probably worth doing because it's right in front of us, is let's take a look let's see, like all these are out of date too. Yeah, no, the Dread Waste, the Forgotten Temple of Shun the Vile. So what do we have left? We have that central tomb. What did I think that tomb was going to have before? I already gave away +1 plate mail. So I think that the far south is the shrine of... So we have like the checkered hallway of traps. They figured that out. We have the tombs of the high priests. Those have both been fully explored. Then we have the altar of Kytheros. Oops. It's probably worth dropping some aspects in here of things that they find. So what would they find here? Probably, is there any defenses to this place? A time golem. Is there any kind of like golem or guardian creature in Shadowdark? Probably a stone golem. That makes sense. Oh man, immune to non-magical sources. Makes 3 slam attacks and 1 slow. So it would make sense that there's a stone golem in there, which also means that there's a high-level treasure in there. We'll roll that. What else would Kytheros put in his? So there would be a lot of like murals and signs that show some of the secrets that we have. I think a sad statue of the breakup of Kytheros and Shun. What else? If you were priests of Kytheros and you had a central altar, what would you put in it? Probably a large hourglass that shows the coming of the end of the world. That's fun. All right, so we've got that. What other chambers? So then there's like these hallways here. Probably, are they trapped? They're probably trapped. We'll roll and figure out what that is at the time. Then there's this other chamber. So what would that side chamber be? What would priests of Kytheros put off in a side chamber? The Book of Worlds. So this would be like a journal of Kytheros' travels. Would they protect that? Probably. Let's take a look at like elementals. Probably 2 level 6 air elementals. Then we have a hallway that leads up that's collapsed, and they find the secret door to the secret cave to the adventurer's nook. And then there's this one final chamber, a hidden chamber. Probably a deadly trapped treasure chamber with 2 level 10 treasures. We'll say with 3 treasures. And we'll roll. So 1 to 2 is a 1 to 3 treasure. I don't know. I'll figure it out with 3 treasures and a very deadly trap. And they'll see that there are dead people at the door. I'll roll the trap ahead of time. I guess we can do so now. Why don't we roll a trap? What's that deadly trap look like? Mouse is acting funky. Traps. Need my dice. Roll 12er. 7. We're going to double it too. There's a spiked pit and 4. A barbed net. And I think this could be like right out of Cube, where like the net shreds people. I'm trying to think like how a spiked pit. What if the floor falls in? The problem with the floor is like, how does it reset itself? I guess it's magical, so the floor would literally just magic away and falls, and then you're impaled on spikes, and then a net comes and rips you back up and then shreds you at the top of the ceiling. That sounds like fun. I don't think I need to worry about the trigger because it's going to be screwing with the door. 3 does 3d10 damage and 9. No, that doesn't have an effect. 8. 3d10 damage and paralyze or confuse. Yeah, 3d10 damage. That's pretty deadly. That could wipe out a group. Looks like a fun deadly trap. So that fills out the rest of that dungeon. And then I've got enough material for like after the dungeon. They probably want to do a downtime, some carousing, and then next steps. So I think we've got enough. It's more than enough. I am well set and well established for today's game. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me today while I prepared for my Shadowdark game. If you enjoyed this show and you want more stuff like this, consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It's absolutely free to sign up. You can find a link to the newsletter in the show notes. You get a free adventure generator PDF, and you get a weekly RPG-related email sent directly to your inbox. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get all kinds of really cool features, dedicated Discord server, monthly Q&A, bunch of tips and tricks, City of Arches source book, a bunch of tools to help you run your games, tons of stuff that you get for becoming a patron of Sly Flourish. And you can pick up any of my books, including Forge of Foes, Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master, The Lazy DM's Companion, The Lazy DM's Workbook, all of my fantastic adventure books, and other merchandise, Sly Flourish merchandise. You can get all of that on the Sly Flourish store. Thank you all so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.